Hello, this is Praveen. Welcome to .NET for the ASP.NET Core Web API from beginners to advanced training. So here we are in module 1, foundations of REST API and Web API. Okay. So here in the session 4, like we will talk about controllers in Web API. Okay. API controller and routing behavior. So here are the agenda for items for session 4. We will discuss on the API controller, like in the earlier session, we already discussed in the folder structure, right? Like in the folder structure and the API controller attributes, how it does the automatic data validation, like in model binding, okay, model validation, responses, and status codes, right? So we will brief you on this particular API controller, and we will much go deeper into the web API controller. Okay, so in this particular, you already have this routing API behavior and the API controller, right? With data validation. Now we need to understand with the API controller and how it is differs from the web API controller and MVC controller. Okay, what is the difference in having a web API controller and MVC controller? Okay, and the routing behavior, like in the routings, like in at the controller level, at the action levels, and the attributes levels. Okay, so and with hands-on demo as well. Okay, so let's get started. So in previous session, you already seen the folder structures like in the controllers, app.jsn, and all the routings like in having the program.cs class file and all the rest, right? So now that we need to understand the web APIs, like web API controller. Actually, what is a web API controller? A web API controller is responsible for handling HTTP request and returning the structured response. Okay, so this is the basic controller responsibility. It should be able to take the request and process it and send it back the response. Okay, so this is not with your MVC controller. So this is with your web API controller. So web API controller and MVC controller have some functional differences. Okay, so basically, like web API controller should inherit from controller base. Okay, and it is very lightweight, like in no views, no MVC features. Okay, built-in helper methods like okay with all the status codes. Okay, designed only for APIs, not for rendering. Okay, so in this aspect, MVC controller and web API controller. So MVC controller uses the controller class. Okay, so it has the support for the views, it has the support for view bags, view data, temp data. Whereas like in the web APIs, it will have the support for only the JSON APIs. Okay, so not for this supporting the views and HTTP responses with having a view bag or view data, temp data. It does not have. Okay, so let's understand this in much detail. Like let me connect to my tab and explain you that. Okay. Okay, yeah, it got connected. So let's understand web API controller. So the first thing, how it is differ with the web API controller and a MVC controller, we'll add this attribute API controller, right? So we already learned that in the previous session. Now that we understand like that how that particular class will be inherited, okay? So first of all, you have to understand like in your ASP.NET Core application. So ASP.NET Core is a unified programming model which can develop web APIs and MVC, okay, MVC applications, okay? ASP.NET Core is nothing but MVC web applications. I can develop a MVC web applications as well as web APIs. Okay, so why it is now it is ASP.NET Core is a unified programming model, like it having multiple applications can be developed. So I call this as the unified programming model. Okay, so understand the controller in this MVC web app is different, and the controller in the web APIs are different. Okay, so how it is like in this particular thing, like MVC, like you will have this controller class name inherits controller. Okay, so whereas in this web APIs, you will have this controller class name inherits controller base. So controller base, like in this controller base, it will not have support. It cannot return views. Okay, it cannot return no views. Okay, no HTML or no view bag, view data, temp data, etc. Okay, Sorry, my handwriting is not correct here. So now understand, like in this particular controller base, like there is no support for views. Okay, it cannot return any view. There is no support for HTML. It cannot return any HTML or any view. Okay, so there is no view back, view data, temp data, anything. Like it's not supported. Whereas if you inherit the same controller with controller, it will have this particular, it has support for views. Okay, it can return the HTML, and it can have the all the view back, view data, everything. Okay, so all the support is there for when it is inherit with your controller clicks. Okay, so understand, like if you are having this controller base, it only supports JSON plus status codes. So it can support only the JSON and HTTP responses, requests, and status codes. Okay, so it is always recommended, like when you are working with the APIs, you always use the controller base, not the controller. So when you work with MVC, like you use the controller, but when you work with the APIs, you use controller base. Okay, so I hope you understand. Like I'm going to do a demo on this. Like once you go to the demo, you'll understand much in detail. Okay, so I hope you understand, like in this slide. So what is web API? Like web API is responsible for handling HTTP request and response with the JSON. Okay, it can support only the JSON APIs, JSON request response, and HTTP request and the responses. Okay, it do not have this HTML views, or it doesn't support the views. It cannot return views and everything. Okay, it is only the built-in methods, like in this particular okay, bad request not found, and all these status codes it can return. Okay, so there is no support for no views or MVC features in the controller base. Okay, so understanding, like in the routings, like in you have this route, like in this route of API controllers, like we have already seen, right? So we'll see the routing anatomy, like in routing with the template match with the HTTP verbs. Okay, and with the action methods as well. Okay, let me connect to my Visual Studio and we'll go with a simple demo. Okay, today we are in module 4 and session module 1 and session 4. Okay, understanding web APIs. So simple, open this. So what I did is, like, I added this particular controller. If you can open this controller, and I have this model. Okay, simple model. Okay, which has this employee model with ID, name, and department. Okay, class. So if I can open the employee controller. So employee controller, I have this particular employee controller which inherits the controller base. Okay, so if you can see, here is my controller base. Okay, so I can return only the responses, the request, and return the JSON objects. Okay, so I cannot return a views. So if you can see here, I just comment this and try to return a view. It doesn't allow me. Okay, return view. Okay, so it is, I do not have this support over here. Something like home. So it do not have this particular support. If I change this to controller, okay, it will support me. And it can also return with this okay. Like if your controller can support, like with the JSON, and it has a support for the view also. Okay. So now that we wanted a lighter version for our web API, so I just use the controller base. Okay. So do not misunderstand this here. Okay. So understand over here. For web APIs, if you can see the a base class MVC controller without view support. Okay. So if I can go with the controller, so here, if you can see, it is a class for MVC controller with view support. Okay, I hope you understand. So now that we are working with the controller base for only web APIs. Okay, so now let's understand this employee controller, and we'll route with each of these methods. Okay, so now that I have this particular list of objects with the employees ID, name, and department. Okay, so I have this method. Okay, so which returns all these employees. Okay, so this another endpoint with get by ID. I wanted to search with the ID. Okay, so here is my get by ID. So I have this particular another method, or the endpoint action method, which has get by name. Okay, which search with the name. Okay, finding the employees with the name. And I have this endpoint to insert certain employees into your database, or which the posting a employee JSON object. Okay, so if you can see, like this, how do I route this, provide routing at the controller level, at the action methods. Okay, so let's understand this one. So now that I wanted to route at the controller level, so I will use something called as route API. So action method. So without action method, I just wanted to go with the controller. Okay, So now that how this routing happens, API slash employees. Okay, so this is the routing that happens. Okay, so now that API, you already know what is the importance of using an API controller. So API controller is for the auto validation of your model class, like in your previous session, right? So now that understand this particular thing in the routing at the controller level, and the API controller and the controller base, this makes your complete web API class structure. Okay, so now let understand the individual routes. How do I route with these four methods? Okay, so four action methods or methods. Okay, so if I can see this method, it has this method without a signature, and it is returning this employees. Okay, it doesn't take any input parameters over here. So how do I route to this method? Okay, so if I just go with the http get over here. Okay, if I wanted to find, just I will specify that API slash employee, then this particular get all will be executed. Okay, so you doesn't need to explicitly give the name of this thing. Okay, if you have only one get method of this particular same only of this empty signature, so I can directly use this particular http get. Okay, so what I mean to say is, like, I do not have any other method which do not have which has the empty parameter. Okay, so this automatically gets fired. Okay, so let me open the have this postman over here. So if I can see, I have selected get here. Okay, so I will say this has none. I'll go to the docs. Okay, so nothing here, no params over here. So here if you can see, my application is running under this port number. I'm just routing API slash employees. Okay, API slash employees, like here is my controller. So what it will get, it will match with HTTP get because I selected the get over here. Okay, so let me run this and check it out. So when you have the multiple methods with the same signature, how do I deal with it? We'll come into next picture. Okay, so for now you understand, like, there is a one method which is an empty parameters. Okay, which does not take any of these parameters. Okay, so in that thing, like, it will directly match to this particular get all. Okay, so since I selected the HTTP get over there. Okay, see, I already selected get over here, and I'm not giving this method something called slash get all. Okay, I'm not giving this here. Okay, API slash controller name. So if I select this, so this getting hit. Okay, so without mentioning this particular get all. So because I have only one action method which have the empty, which do not have this overloading method over here. See here, it takes integer parameter, it takes the string parameter. Here it takes the employee parameter. So it does not match with any of these things. So that's what it get fired, right? So let's get F5. So it got fired, and see. So let's say, consider, like, I have the same method, like in the same signature, nothing but the overloading action method. So consider in that way. Okay. So here I have this HTTP get here, get all departments, let's say. Okay, so I have this thing, both the action methods having the same signatures. Okay, so it doesn't return out this, but it doesn't have any input parameters. It also does not have any input parameters. So in this particular thing, it will have the ambiguity. It does not know which method has to be fired. Okay, so if I go through this, it will, if I try to run this same method, it will give me ambiguation problem, ambiguity with both the endpoints. See here, I have this endpoint. Sorry, just may open the Visual Studio again. See, I have this, but both the method signature same, right? So it will have the ambiguity. So I have this at the controller level routing. So if I go here, it gives the exception. See, ambiguous match exception between your get all and get all departments. Okay, so this what's the issue. So in that case, I need to explicitly give the name for this action method. Okay, so give something like get depart. Okay, save this and restart this. So in this case, like, when you give the get department, then this endpoint can be executed. Okay, here it will directly execute with the get all. Okay, so here, click here. See, the get all being executed here. Okay, so if I mention the get department, okay, the action method, like whatever I explicitly mentioned, this routing has the HTTP verb and the action method as well. Okay, so run. So this all got fired. Now I can filter, write the logic with the get only the departments with the HR, right? Whichever, or the IT, or whichever the logic I wanted, I can give that. Okay. So it's giving me the response. So if you can see, like this is like with the integer parameters, it is taking certain integer parameters. Okay. So let me add that thing like in having integer parameters. Let's say HTTP get of, I open the braces and I give the ID over here. Okay. So it will match with the HTTP get. Okay. So just restart this, and now that I can just mention, I can just give this integer parameter here. Okay. So it routes with your action controller level API/controller, and the action method, I just pass the integer. Okay. You're getting my point? Like we are just passing with the integer parameter over here. So I just run this. The breakpoint comes and hits over here, and it will filter with the ID over here, whatever the logic I written. So it is returning this response, right? Okay. So similarly, like if I have this, but I wanted to have the ambiguity, like I wanted to have the combination of both of the things, like in having the action method as well as the method signature. Okay. So how do I do that? Like I can have this particular HTTP get name slash. Okay, so this is the combination of having this method routing and the parameter routing as well. Okay, so let's restart this. So nothing but I can navigate to this particular thing using this particular action method and the parameter name also. Okay, name slash, I wanted to pass Praveen over here. Okay, so that action method will get fired. See, how did I route to this combination of both having the action, having this particular explicitly mentioning that uh, action method get verb and having this method signature also. So I did mention slash that signature parameter name. Okay, so let's run this. So whatever the response I got it. Okay, so now that here I have this thing like in the post method here. Okay, this is the post method, like let's by this as the HTTP post. Okay, so just go with employees, remove this, since this is at the HTTP post, right? So we are routing at this particular HTTP verb level. So I just go to this and select the post level. I do not have any other methods which is having the post methods, right? I do not have any other overloading methods or anything. So it directly comes and hit this particular breakpoint. Okay. So just go through this and go through the body and pass this particular JSON object. Sorry, JSON. Just I wanted to insert for Raj. Okay. So it got hit. I just need to restart this. Okay. Now that put that send that request for this post method. I selected the post method here, and I'm passing the JSON object for Raju. Okay. So just send it. So now the breakpoint got fired. Okay. So now that I can insert the data for Raju as well. Okay. Whatever the logic that I have written. I hope you understand, like in this particular, how do I route with the controller level and the action verb and having the specifying this endpoint explicitly, and both the combinations of having this parameter as well as the naming of the action method. Okay, so here I passed the integer parameter. Okay, here I passed the naming convention, explicitly mentioned this endpoint name and this parameter. Okay, so like the method signature. Okay, so this is very easy way to identify the routing to the action methods. Okay, I hope you understand with this session. Okay, let me recap for you everything. So this will take some time to load. So in this session, you learned what is Web API controller, okay? How what is like ASP.NET Core Unified Programming Model. Okay, we can develop in MVC applications as well as Web APIs. Like when you inherit the controller class with controller, it will become an MVC application. Okay, when you inherit that with the Web APIs, like with the controller base, like it will become the Web API controller, which is which is the short version. Okay, and you also learned on the routings, like how do I route with my controller class level and the method HTTP verb level and with the method level as well. Okay, and with the post level and in combination of both as well. Okay, so that's it this for this session. Okay, let's catch up with the next session in the routing types and advanced routing. Okay, thank you. Thanks for watching.